In hoeverre hebben we dat Adobe XD echt nodig? Ik heb het niet op mijn laptop.
Nou, daar kijk ik vast mee, maar je hebt toch het Adobe pakket van school?
Hij is niet illegaal. Maar of hij helemaal legaal is, de versie die ik heb, dat weet ik ook niet. Maar het doel is wel alleen, dan moet ik zeg maar de licentie voor daar moet ik er nog bij kopen, zeg maar. Dus ik kan ja, ingewikkeld, maar niet op een officiële manier, laat het zo gaan. Maar zeg maar ook vaak met Anna. Ik heb in de studie voor les is het een ding van ja, ga er wel mee werken, want het is echt heel handig.
Ga maar eens zien. Okay, let's start again. Okay, I know that this program is completely new to most of you. And most of it is actually, if you know the basics of InDesign, you know the basics of Illustrator, then this is easy peasy. And there's a couple of things that are super convenient about working in a prototype tool like this. And one of the things that we discussed this morning as well, there was one person that made a comment about, yeah, but we have to make a portfolio website in HTML. So what is the difference here between that? And what I mentioned there is that you're not being trained as front-end developers. And it's super good to have the basics of HTML and know what CSS is and how they relate. But until there is a point that you really have full control over HTML coding, you will have to do so many things in order to design properly in that arena. That is good to know, but I think that you should also have a tool that flips this coin and just lets you focus on the design part and then think about how this should be coded. Yeah? It's just a different way of working. So by default, this program opens up. I just made a new file, and if you start a new file, you can already access and for instance, have a mobile setting, or in this case, I used a web on 1920 by 1080, so it's like a HD video formatting. So every page or canvas shows up as this rectangular little page. And when you select this empty page, there's a couple of settings that you can go over. You can, in the appearance, you can set a background color, or you can also, under View, show the layout grid. So here you could also specify how many columns it has, the gutter between the columns, or the margins on the side could be 50 pixels. So you would have, let's say, some columns, some structures that could help you to make a default grid, how this is kind of built up. You can even put things on responsive resizing, that if you change that it kind of takes this fluid width. And basically the tools that you have for this program is you're selecting cursor, a couple of shapes, a line, a pen, whoop, a text tool, an artboard tool, and your zoom function. And then this additional little left panel is where, in this case, now this is selected here in the top. So you can open and close. And here it collects all the assets, so all the parts that you will collect, that you will reuse throughout your design. And here are the artboards, or all the layers that you have. The last one is for plugins. So under plugins, you can also go to discover plugins. And then there's a shitload of little extra things that are very interesting and useful that you can just download on top of it as extensions to help you out in a variety of different ways. But basically, if we just start, if I could say, I'm going to make a title of the website here. If I just added it as a separate text, it will kind of show up as a little box around my text with a cursor. And what you can do is that by just dragging it, you can easily scale it. And everything else is, let's say, specified here in the text. So you have a line function, some object. I think that someone has its microphone on because I hear a little bit of echo. And so yeah, you can change the size here, set the spacing, you name it. So we have a title here, and let's use a Memphis. Feel like Memphis today. And maybe I'm going to, now I click the option and drag so I can duplicate this. I'm gonna, this is title number 1. I'm gonna make this a bit smaller, comme ça. And perhaps I'm also going to make something of a menu button here. Like this. You'll also see that when you start to align, it also kind of like already shows you the distance in pixels between this. So you have a bit of control how this is, let's say, how you can position stuff. And I can, of course, add objects, like I'm gonna draw a little circle here. I can have a fill, a border, the border size could be 2, inside, etc. Give it a shadow if I want. All these kind of like tiny little things that you could do. Let's say these are a couple of icons that we have here. And I can also make a frame to place an image in, for instance. So easiest way actually is to add, just to kind of drag and drop from your Finder. You can straight just throw some stuff in. And then it even kind of rescales, resizes inside the box. You can double click inside of it. The same as in InDesign, so you could also say, oh, I want to have this, this cut out, or let's say that this is my image. I have a title. And perhaps I'm going to make something that is the lead, which is about this post. So basically, what I said this morning is that I took this example of a website that I made 2 years ago, is that when you think about typography in the web or on websites, there's a lot of things that are always highly consistent, and they are basically the same as we have to think about this empty InDesign, that we need a body text and a subheader and a title and a footnote. We have the same elements actually for a website, but also we have a couple of master pages that we think about. So usually the only big kind of inconsistent page or mashup is the home page, because there's a lot of attributes which come together on a home page, how you sort them out, and they act as a kind of a portal to, let's say, other types of content. So here I have a header, this part in the top, which is, let's say, my menu. This is the title of the show, which actually also acts as a link always back to the home page. Then there's a menu which drops down and you can go to specific pages. And then there's, in this case, a video on the left, and a couple of feature boxes here on the right. We call them feature boxes because they actually refer to an article that is deeper inside the website. So these refer to artist projects. These are more about pages, so these are lighted in blue, so about, getting around, or the site. And then the green ones are event types. So they have a date, a time, an image, it's an event, and then a title, and then the participating artists. So here again, you see that why is it even more necessary to be very coherent and specific is that while you might be the one that designs it or in the book creates it, in the case of a website, you actually build something that doesn't have content, because on the backside of that, the programmer will build an interface or a custom content management system, the CMS, that they can say, create a new page, and then a page opens up and that has a text field for title, text field for author or artist, a text for the date or the time, then a text box for fields for type of body text. And once they fill this in and say publish, it will look like a page. But you only have to set the rules. So that's why in these feature boxes, the content that we see here, the names, they come from one text field in the backside of this database that says this event, who spin around you, has these artists. And if you show the artist, they will show up in this style. It's not that you can say, oh, I want to have this one slightly different. No, that's not possible. You define every piece of content specifically in what kind of style it should be placed. And that is something to keep in mind when we design websites. Oh yeah, and it's funny. Basically, you see the rotation here, this kind of movement of these boxes. So this animation is connected to the API of a weather station in Toronto. So if the wind picks up and it blows harder, they move faster. So it's kind of a real time using data of a weather station to do animations inside this website. It's also funny to kind of, you can automate things as animations, but you can also use data to perform, let's say, these animations. So if we go back, so this is like this little box is connected to a page, which is another template or another master page where we have the same header. Then we have images with captions. Then there's the title, the artist, an intro, a bio, previous, next, related. So all these fragments of data, they come from a backend, but they're all specified how they should appear when they are collected in one page. Yeah. So the way that an event which is related to his project is shown here is the same how it appears here under the events, like here. Yeah. So with this in mind, the consequences of how you show specific parts of content and data on a database and in a web platform, we have to bring this to when we make a mock-up and design the platform from scratch. So let's say this is one of those feature boxes. So we can say, well, this is a title number 1, which is a exhibition. And there's a small piece of text around it, and this is the image. And I'm gonna, just for now, I'm gonna just say, okay, I'm gonna make a box around it. I won't give it a filling. Like this. So I would like to have this thing be, let's say, the portal to an article about that specific show. But usually there will be more. There's, let's say, multiple posts. So one thing what I could do is that I select my group, and under object I can say also group, and then I can even copy, paste, and then drag, or I can just select it, and by keeping the option button I can just duplicate it. So now I have 2. Great. But I would like to customize it later on, but I would also like to see it in a bigger string. There's some really interesting things about this program that help you, because this would be close to how I would originally do this in InDesign. I would just build it up in pixels, make a grid, almost like a book, and then hand it over to the programmer and say, this is the design of the website, can you please make it? Which is perfectly possible, but in order to speed things up, if I wanted then later on to change something in the header or the menu, I would need to kind of then redo that for 20 pages. Or yeah, there's some complicated things to bypass this, but I even was already annoyed by that I would even break my own promise to do this correctly. So I was already looking for a way to speed things up for myself. So I started working and trying this out. And the interesting thing of, for instance, such a simple gesture of, let's say, the repetition of a feature box can be also done by having this, what they call repeat grid. So if I pressed it once, it will show up with 2 handles here. And so I can just easily just drag. Can make as many as I want. And also here, okay. That's pretty convenient, right? And so if I select my page and even drag it down, because my page is long, I can just make a whole list of these. And you see this tiny little blue line here. That is actually the bottom. This refers to the bottom of your browser window. This is kind of the visual area, how you start. And from that point on, it scrolls. Because the great advantage of working in a program like this is that you have an instant access to a prototype, because here in the top right display, I can have a desktop preview. So if I open this, I see a preview of my design of my website, and I can instantly scroll and already test and see what's going on. Great. And still, I'm also able to change things on the fly, because this first box that I just drew is still connected as, let's say, a kind of a master to this string. So if I want to say, you know what? I'm going to place this more here. You see, it does that on all of them. So I can just, by just designing one of them, I can completely alter everything in this. This is going to be a bit smaller. Right. So even a function like that is already kind of is really nice, and it helps a lot. And then still, I'm basically I can just drag and drop different items in there, and or deselect. I can later on ungroup and say that. Have different images in there, ungroup them, even change other images or change the titles here so that it, as a mock-up, feels more realistic that it's different types of content. But even already this kind of shows me, okay, so this works like this. And so whatever you turn into this group, you can make this, make this fit. What is also nice about this, in order to get things really organized, is that I can have this title of the website, and maybe it will appear in some other cases as well. So here under object, I can add a character style to asset. So once I do that, I go to my assets, it just creates a character style of the selection that I just made. So I can say home title. And here is a smaller one. I can also say add character style to asset. And I'm going to say this is my menu style. So if I need to make something else here, something else, I can always just quickly flip from between this or this. So they're always the same. And I can always, with my option click, could also control click, edit this and say, this needs to be 32 and I want it to be bold. Okay, and then it also updates that automatically. Yeah? Go away. Yeah. Ha. Just. The same thing, just like XD doesn't have a differentiation between paragraph styles or character styles. Everything is just called a character style. Just to make it more inconsequent for you guys, after I said, do not select entire text and turn them into character styles. In XD, you can only work in character style, so here you could. But for the objects, it's the same. I can also make a little object here. Let's say this is a kind of a social icon or something, and I'm gonna put here a Facebook. This is gonna be my Facebook icon. Snazzy. Select and group. I can also, as an object, can say add of make component. And when I make a component, it also shows up here in my list as a default icon. So if I need to have them somewhere else, I can just drag it and then it duplicates it. And you see the difference? This is the one that was originally made as an icon. And it is clear by, it has this filled green top left little cursor, whether the duplicate doesn't have that. It's kind of the master and slave kind of thing, parent, child, whatever you want to name it. So if I change something here, you see, it also follows it. So how I usually work in sites like this is that you have your pages, but normally I would make another kind of a canvas here on the side. And here I kind of collect all the little things that I draw as a kind of a mood board of assets and things that I can use, like colors, swatches, icons, type sizes, other kind of image boxes or anything. They're all organized on this one palette, and then I can just fill my pages and drag and drop them in there wherever I need them. Like, oh, I need a text box. Oh, there's a commenting section with an icon, or et cetera, et cetera. You can also kind of lay them out on these pages to organize all the initial designs so that whatever page you make besides that, you can use these duplicates, and later on, if you need to tweak, you only tweak it at one point and it updates it over the whole spectrum. Because I shit you not, once you start building in this thing and you have a more complicated idea for a website, this can turn easily into 30 different pages. So you really don't want to spend time redoing all the icons because you forgot to make a component out of that. Just say. But also the great thing is that you can use them in combination and in different ways. So let's say this is now the title of the header, and I created a background color. Let's add this as a swatch here. So I can use a color, add it on the plus, and then it takes this as a color. So if I want, I can also now use this as a fill, use this color, and I could also add color to assets. So now I have the colors also already lined up in here with the character styles and the component. So if I make a header, like let's say the top of this website, I want to create a space where this is always the same, and I'm going to put this on the back side, arrange, send to back, and I'm going to give this a slight shadow. So basically what we have now is that, let's say this now has the top of a website. I'm gonna place this nicely a bit on in the middle of this, align them like this, okay. And then with that background bar combined, I can also say, make a component. So now this whole section is something that can be dealt as one object. So if I would, let's say, make another page, so I'm gonna just with the option duplicate this page, okay. And if I wouldn't have this, so I can just always drag that in and have this duplicate of this one on every page. And the great thing is also that in this setting here, on the right side, you also have the position to say fix position when scrolling. Like this. So when I now preview, I already have this interaction. Simple, huh? And it doesn't require any code. But so you already can see, that's pretty basic, pretty easy to kind of lay out a potential website. But what is also interesting is that, for instance, you can use these later on when you start really prototyping. So now we're just building the core set of, let's say, of our page. This first one is, let's say, kind of a spin-off. So I can also let it start here, and I'm going to make an image here underneath, and what else do we have? Okay. So now I have this page and I have this page. So we now have two pages that are slightly different. The great thing for XD is that you can really kind of try to make this interactable in a way that you can also show either for yourself, but also to clients, like how it actually works. So there's these three tabs in the top: design, prototype, and share. So prototype is where we actually connect the pages and turn this into a prototype model. And the share is, let's say, how you combine the assets and to collect all these pages and share them as a presentation or for developers or for design comment related, is that you can make a shared link that actually previews this in a browser that you can just send over to a client or to anyone so that they can just look at it online and test it and to see if they agree or not or have comments. Or a coder can just look at the source code and then copy paste the CSS out to speed up the building procedure. But so for the prototype, if I select one of my canvases and this here, there's a couple of things you can do. Like now the page is selected, but you can also select any element and you see that it gets these in and outputs. So in this case, what we can do is I'm going to say that when I click, so by default, if I click once, it selects this whole component that I made, the whole header. If I double tap on that, it kind of opens inside of the group, and then I can select, let's say, one item inside of this group, and then just click and drag and say, I'm going to connect that to that page. Is it simple as that? And I can also say this one refers to something else, or in this case, this, hey, come here. Yeah, this one also refers to this, but this one refers back. So when I now test this, I can go here and go to the second page, or I can go to, where was you? I didn't I? Where did I put it? Ah, here, this back, yeah. So once or back. So it's a very simple way of creating a click model between those pages. And for now you saw that there's, let's say, cross dissolve. It just kind of transfers from one page into the other. In this prototype setting, for every link, I can even specify that this one now goes to that page. So in this, it trigger, it says tab. So once I click, make a transition, it goes to this page, web, that we call this. The animation is dissolve. I can also say, well, slide left. Instead of ease out, I can also say wind up, for instance. And then if I test it now, it will just have a different transition. Okay? So it's like a simple, effective way of also kind of making these transitions kind of visible the way you want. Could be just a quick kind of dirty go, touch and go. And you could set it to none, and then it's just very plain and simple. I click and whoop, that's it. Oh, I accidentally recorded this. Which brings me, by the way, to another feature. I will get back to that later. So 1 or 2. The great way of starting to think about how you can make a whole set of pages to figure that out and to test them, you can really specify that and make that as complex as you want. So in the end, could end up being almost like a spider web of connections of what leads to what and how back and forth. But these transitions also bring in another element, which is very interesting, is that I could, for instance, make a object that uses this animation, for instance. So if I go back to my canvas and I'm gonna just create some kind of shape here, and I'm gonna give it like this. What do I, no, you know what? I'm just gonna do something else. I created this component of this icon here, but maybe I want to add an effect to this to give the impression that there is this interaction. So once you have an object that is this green box that is a component, you also have this here, these states that you can adjust. So by default, it is shown in its default state, but I can add a state, so I can add hover state, which means a hover state is where you kind of go with your mouse over. Like the moment you go over it, you can change the state of things. So between these two states, I can alter the appearance, and then XD actually makes the transition in between. So if I'm selected in my hover state, I could say, oh, you know what? I'm going to make this red. I'm also going to give this a red outline, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Don't know why. So default state, hover state. So if I now test this and I go over, whoop, whoop, and that's not, you cannot do this in InDesign. And it's just like 1 minute of work. It's like so super easily done. And this is of course like a stupid example, but you understand the complications or the implications that you can really kind of do tiny little things that really bring a web model more to life in the sense of what you want to do. So in the case of also a hover state, let's say this is the title of the website. If I turn this into a component, which is then the title, and I'm adding a hover state here, and I'm going to say, okay, this is also red, and underline. So always remind yourself that if you try and do this, you make something in the hover state, but you have to go back to the default state before testing, or else it will also test it in its hover state as default. So click back on default state and then open up the preview, and then we have this and this. Yeah? Which also brings me to, I can, let's say, automatically, it should be that on this page, you see, it then also, because it's still part of that same component, So it does this also, you don't need to do this for every page. So you only set this in this component of the header once, and then it applies this to every page. But I can also make things in such a way that these transitions between pages actually also have another purpose or get some kind of use, is that if I would create a shape here, and there this kind of layering comes in, because here, for instance, this is called rectangle 4, and the components also have names, so you can kind of determine what is on this canvas. So if I make a component that, I don't know what this would be, but I'm going to add the same component here, but here it's placed on the top and it is, let's say, smaller. I can also go from this page to that page in my prototype. And let's say if I go from this tab, I can also say auto animate, ease in, let's take it a bit slower. So if I click on this image, it turns it, and you see it go back and forth, but I did something crazy. This somehow, wait, let's try it again. Oh, wait. Let's do this. And then auto animate, yes. So I have this, whoop, and then it goes up, but it somehow remembered where I got stuck with scrolling, so it didn't go back to the top of the page. And it's still, you see that there's an issue with the layering, that this new object now is on the top. But I actually wanted to show, and then I should just put it on the same position for now. And object arrange, send to back. Object arrange, send to back. That it also can transform, let's say, these animated shapes between two states. So, whoop, it just calculates the morph in between. It's like so simple and easy, but can be up. So this morning, when I was also going over this this procedure, I also kind of created the same kind of structure of a page, where this box also has a hover and different images in there, so that if you no, wrong document. So that when you hover, you can also in this hover state inside one of these boxes, like have a slightly different zoom level. So you have things like this, or make images scroll in a frame between two images. Or have a menu coming in from the side. So that means that what I did here is that this is that home page, and I created a component of a menu item. But it's also in here, but it's on the right side. So it's kind of like in the point where it still touches the page, so it knows it's the same object, then it goes to the other page where that object is also there, but here, and it just moves it from the right into the image. So it makes us think, oh, there's a menu opening. But it's just a kind of a trick. Hop. So you can, these are hideous examples, but in this case, you can easily, and still kind of like I can tweak this, make it shorter, or maybe I'm going to change the settings of it. But in the prototype, I can also say that this box, when I use the menu, that it goes to menu open and it eases out in 1 second. So these are like curves that help you to kind of make this more fluid animations, or normally it would kind of go from point A, B. But sometimes it's nice that it goes B, or so you can kind of play with those kind of default settings of these animations. So that now, boing, stupid, but it can help you in order to make these kind of quick iterations of what you kind of have in mind. Another thing where you can really see how this becomes useful in a kind of a small scale is, for instance, that here I also just created, let's say, a box with words and then a string of, let's say, comments or some kind of like input. And then I wanted to kind of play around with this kind of enlargement icon. And this is actually also a component which has a hover state and a default state. So when I kind of preview this, I have a page here that it's like a little subtle little icon, but it is just kind of like you can really play with what you want to do there, just to give it this more refined sense of what are you asking from the visitors, of how can you kind of like, oh yeah, okay, so probably it's going to open something, it's going to enlarge something. And this also is nice because this is actually a text frame, but it's more of a text frame that you can scroll inside. So there's more content, but you can scroll within. So there's these little aspects that you can really build up to make it more and more sophisticated and more complex. Whether if you would need to code this from scratch, you already would get like after 10 minutes, like, oh, jQuery, Java, forget it. It's just normal. And there's some people that love to dive into tutorials and do that. And I totally dig that. But I think that from your perspective, I would love to be able to kind of at least give you another set of tools that give you just more of an intuitive way of thinking about interaction and how to control typography on a screen without being kind of like in this kind of obstacle of like, yeah, I saw something really cool, but I have no clue because I looked at the source code and I got baffled. And then you just simply give up. And I think that there is something nice about this ability of working with typography and giving this kind of like slide interactions to really improve on top of that. And so if you build from these basics that I now kind of laid out, also in these plugin sections where you can discover, you can also find a shitload of good assets that sometimes can be useful. Because if you do a proper platform and you build it professionally, this is kind of the mood board. This is kind of what you're looking at. This is how complicated it gets to really to design a full-blown platform, because that means that every interaction, like how your header bar goes from one state into the other needs to be defined. So these are all these components that can be reused in different events on different pages. The elements, app bar top, backdrops, banners, bottom navigation, different kind of card sections, headline, where different types of images can flow in. All these typography things are completely specified and already remade once a programmer starts on this. Because programming hours are expensive, especially when it comes to app development, that they have to write this in C++, then, you know, this is, or in a lot of Java or Python. So so you need to really know what you want from the design before you let someone work this out. And you already see it, like you have to really think about, oh, if a user presses this button, then it comes into this field, and then how does this field look, and what are the options? Oh, they can take two routes. They can go left on this route, right to that, or sign up. Oh, you don't have a login yet, then create a new user. Like all these fields, they all need to be determined, how they're gonna look and how they're gonna be specified. So that's why you get this enormous string of all these. You see, it's really, it becomes a material design UI kit to see how you can really build the system of, okay, so this is, let's say, the headlines. This is headline 6, headline 4, body text, all the color schemes, primary color, secondary colors, grids, how to build the icons. Here is the whole icon set. And it's great because you don't need to make them. In some cases, it's also nice to kind of just, you know, yeah, you can make a new cross, of course. It's really nice to make a new cross, but yeah, how many crosses are already there? If you want to close something, you just take a cross. So product icons, platform product icons. So everything is kind of like specified how these grids are built out, and it's highly sophisticated, but it's good to see how deep this goes, because once you go and work for an agency or in a studio and you get this kind of assignment and they say, yeah, we need to, this is actually what you're going to be making. And also the tool that you're probably going to be using. That's why, to answer your question, yes, I think this is exactly the moment when you also need to start learning programs like these. Yeah. One other aspect that I figured out once, because I think I started to use this program last year. Adobe was late on the boat. There was a lot of people using Sketch, and they saw shit. So they created XD on the fly, and it was really bad at first. And they tried to keep up, and now it became really, really rock solid and good already, I think. And they improved a lot of features, also knowing that, yeah, they want to keep everyone on board of their Adobe ecosystem. But there's also something nice about these kind of very quick and dirty animations and transitions that you can use and make, is that, for instance, what I also use it for instance, I was working for Jonas on a movie for Jonas Staal last year, and then now they had a whole series of online events at the New Institute in Rotterdam. So we were building this kind of movie scene. So I use it as a kind of a storyboard editor to have like a storyboard. So like there are different fragments. But also the nice thing is that since these are all components, so I make a group of these logos and stuff that we used for a show in Berlin. I can place them on a video screen, and then I just kind of do that. I duplicate it in 3 times. So here's an empty one, but here I kind of placed it to the right, and then just shifted them apart. And here I left to the left. Sounded apart. And then in prototype, I just made, it goes from this to this, from this to this, but instead of using a tab trigger, I just say keys and gamepad and press 1. So what I can do, and that's the nice thing about also the way you can use them to preview stuff, is that you can just record and it makes a screen recording, super high res. So on the pixel aspect of your MacBook Pro, so that's far higher than what we think that it previews. Because my canvas is actually 1920 by 1080, but my screen has a higher resolution than that. So I can just press 1. And so I just record this and then send it, here's your animation. Instead of me doing all this shit in After Effects and then spending like half a day, oh, this block goes here and then this block goes there. And it's like, well, this in combination with OBS is the golden ticket, because you just up, and then I just key the green out and I can just put it anywhere I want. And it's super fast. And I'm like, oh yeah, we need a title. Okay, then, here's the title. 1, 2, hey, and then it goes away. So I use it actually for a lot of animation that if they don't have a lot of budget to kind of make funky things, I do this in 10 minutes. And then I invoice like a half a day. Of course, you have to keep making money, huh? Sorry?
Can I extract that animation as an MP4 or not in the screen recording?
It's an MP4. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of create these, but also, for instance, I showed this morning also for social media stuff. So I was working on the Guangzhou Biennale, and this was the first really big website that I used this program on. So here, this is, let's say, this overall canvas where I collect all these buttons and boxes that I predefine and use and make. So there's, let's say, the header. If you click on the sign up for the mailing list, it becomes this sign up for quarterly with boxes, text boxes, bios, streamers, the colors, images, these kind of index boxes with, let's say, an article plus an image going back and forth. So I all specify them here so that then in here I can just preview this, and then I have this website that I can just see how that works. Right? And yeah, you see there's still this kind of like little animations in there, index. So I can really tweak and see how all these animations kind of work out. But also for this animation, that's why I wanted to show you, is that in the same way, this is, for instance, a portrait 1920 by 800,080 pixels. So this is, for instance, for a Instagram story. Because then you get this last minute, yeah, we're going to launch this and we need an Instagram story. And actually there's no one that actually thought about this like a week ago. And we have no clue what we're doing. Can you please help us? It's sometimes pathetic how people come with questions that are so dumb. But then there's XD. So I already had all this material for the website. So I kind of pre-composed and I made, let's say, this kind of the poster. And then I just had some layers with this kind of speckles. and I had a box here, a box here. And the same way that I just showed you is that I just make one page where here it's all underneath, and I kind of took it apart. And so if I preview this, I just press 1. And then 2. I record it, they have their Instagram post. So it's also interesting, if you have these materials, it's super easy to just kind of create some little animations on the fly, or make transitions for things inside the web, because it's also, you can even, and also the export function is amazing, that sometimes if you would make a website and then you think, oh, I need some images of graphics and I need to export them separately, you can really export it in such a way that if I would select one item here and I would say export, it would just even takes the content starting soon, go away, PNG, and I can decide whether it's the original design, or for iOS, I can even export it that it exports it directly in 3 sizes with a transparent background, or I can just take the whole page or even these 3 pages and then it exports these pages directly. So that's super convenient. And so the last part of that is that what I showed here is if you go and let's say you have all these items, you can also say and select which items you want to, let's say, mark for export, so that when you share them or include them, they will be part of that export. If you want to kind of send this over to a client, you can go to share and then say, could be a presentation. I set it to present, like update the link. It just generates a web version of your project and puts it into a separate URL that you can just email. So if I open this, I get my design inside the browser with all the interactions. So I can test. And if I, here, I can also, this was one that I shared, but you can also then look at, let's say for the developer, let's say all the color codes, which kind of character styles you've used, and also even just copy paste. So all these CSS variables to kind of say, oh, this is how, which family font, what size, etc. You can just take over. And that's actually the nice part where it kind of bridges the ideas of the intuitively of how you would be able to design in Illustrator or in InDesign, combined with interactivity, animation, and the sharing options to bridge this thing of the language between you as a designer and potentially someone that's just really good in coding, but would not necessarily instantly understand what you're trying to do. And then you can really build from that. So I think that it is a very flexible and convenient tool to do and to work with. The learning curve is super easy. And another thing is what I also really like about this is that it also brings up even the possibilities of adding, let's say, content to this whole part. Is like I tried to explain you and I gave you a preview of this data merge last week in this crappy video. And this idea of having a Google Sheet with content instantly connected to a design. So what is also great about this is that here under plugins, I also have a Google Sheets plugin. So I can even say, okay, I'm going to make something data here. And I'm going to give that a outline. So in this case, I could say repeat grid. So I'm going to just make more stuff in here. And I can import that to a CVS file and say that the mapping of this is, I'm going to pick name and randomize content. Okay. So it can instantly import data from a Google Sheet and then use that as the content directly inside your click model. And it can also do that instantly by importing images. And that's insanely convenient for also if you want to build a prototype that needs to really have kind of more proper content than having the same image everywhere or having the same title appear everywhere. So this is a way of also including content in a very quick and accessible way. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, can you also work on it like in real time with different people?
Yes. You can here in the top invite to documents. So you can share and you can work in the same document. Because there's, in bigger platforms, there's teams. You say, you know, you two are only going to work on the menu. And you two are going to work on these type of pages. So you can really collaborate on things, which is a good point because it's actually also very powerful about this. And what's also nice is that here you have even a device preview. So you can also hook up your mobile and then just have a layout and you see real time on your phone how the size is and how it interacts on your phone. So you can use it as an app, as a click model to really test it on your phone, just how it should work. With navigation, with press, with swipes, the whole shebang. That's a good part of it. Yeah? Any other questions? No?
If I work on typographic work, is it better first work on Illustrator and then or design?
You could, but I think that the power in here is usually that because I think in some cases it will turn this more into a graphic object if you copy paste between stuff. So my advice would be that natively it's just better. It's like if you make a book in InDesign, you're not going to start first in Photoshop making a page layout and then trying to import it in InDesign. So you make the book in InDesign. So in this case, if you're going to build a platform in here or design a screen, it's better to do it in here also in the sense that you have the option to have, let's say, responsive resizes that things can be squeezed to mobile or back or things. Okay. So I actually found out kind of this morning that I already thought that we had 4 classes, but we actually have 5 classes until the sprint. So we have another class next week. Ding, ding, ding. Ah, there is a waiting room. Hello, Femke. So, okay. Yeah, I did record it, but I totally forgot because the other ones were kind of live in, but I think I still have it. So I will, I'm also going to record this one and then I will share those. But also since we have, let's say, a week that I didn't anticipate on, maybe in retrospect, I could have maybe given you all a very big fat assignment. But now we're going to just wing it and just take it easy. So what I did this morning is that we just went over a lot of little things that actually came up, just questions about XD. And I think and hope that probably in this class that there is also still a lot of questions that might have come up by just experimenting and trying stuff out last week with that. Were there any people that somehow couldn't do any tryouts? No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this morning there was also someone that had a problem with the update to either Catalina. Ah. Yeah. Yeah. That's unfortunate, but shit happens. So, were there any specific topics that came up that I can kind of go through them one at a time to kind of show some details of what we discussed last week? Hit me. You mean external URLs, really? No. No, it's an internal kind of prototype to, because if you're prototyping something and you're making your own website, the only thing you don't want to do is that people leave.
Yeah, we were using XD as a presentation format for like practicing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of like OneNote or like PDFs. Yeah.
OBS you can, or but no, in terms of pulling live, let's say, content straight from there, that depending on, you could visualize to make a screenshot and put the screenshot on a page and then link to that page as though it's that website, and then go back, for instance. But it's not that you, but it's also the question, yeah, in most cases, there's not a particular reason to go out of the ecosystem in that sense, except for, let's say, if I would create an application or an app that I want to give a preview of the link that I'm going to visit, yeah, you would probably do a mock-up of taking a screenshot and embedding that as an image, but not taking you literally out of this.
Yeah, and I think that's the same when you embed like a video, right?
Videos.
Embedding the actual thing with like.
There's a lot of requests, and what I also looked into this morning is that so in this plugin section, there's this discover plugins, and people are making more and more and more add-ons to this ecosystem, which of course that's what I explained last time a little bit, is that Adobe was actually a bit late on the arrival and is trying to catch up. So they made a very kind of open bareback system and opened this up to, let's say, the community to make additions to this to actually speed the process up, but also get a form of commitment that I think probably you can even buy stuff or templates or tools or whatever in there. But one of the features that a lot of people are complaining and would love to see is that you could potentially just have a YouTube link embedded, and that it shows like how does a video show in this. And I honestly, I think that is not possible yet. But there are tools like, for instance, so you can make a prototype and then this plugin exports it to HTML. Very convenient. Then you can maybe just copy paste and embed code of the YouTube in that HTML. Then that would be something. Here also this one, convert design to live web. So there are some parts that you could then think of adding that, but I think that so far, you see, no, there's no real way of importing video files, for instance, to display this. But there are tons of interesting other things that can really help you out to make your life a lot easier. Like, yeah, if you need a website which includes like an event list or a calendar view, oh, then there's something, add this calendar to it and then tweak that. Mock-up tools, so a lot of people kind of created icons. I already briefly showed you this Google Sheets as a form of importing content. So you could just kind of make a Google Sheet and then take all the content from that sheet and use it as almost as a live CMS to populate your content in your sketch. But this one I also haven't tried. You see they're also being rated advanced export. So advanced export for developers. So probably it gives a very pure kind of translation into CSS coding. And there's some interesting stuff that you can try out, and most of this is just for free. But yeah, there are definitely, let's say, limitations to how flexible it is in terms of tool for using it anything else besides prototyping a website. Yeah. Any other question? Wow, it was so clear. Who completely understand the use of components in combination to animations and transitions between pages in a prototype setup? Okay. That was one of the questions that came up this morning. So maybe I can just briefly go through this again, because I think that is, let's say, at the core of what might be handy to just go over again, just to get this clear. And as an example, so what I made here is that I actually drew 4 shapes, and I made a component out of it. So basically, just to kind of reiterate this, I have a shape. And the reason I'm doing this again and showing this to you is that every time you draw something on your artboard, it gives you a naming for every element that is on this page. In this case, this is called rectangle 8. I already drew a couple, so by this time I came to rectangle 8. I can rename those to say red box. And then if you know that this particular one is a red box. Hello? Is there someone talking? Okay. The reason why I point this out is that if you want to have elements repeating on pages, but you also want to have a form of interaction between those, they are always need to be named the same. So if I want to make something that changes this one, and I want to change it in something or transform it into something else on another page, I can copy and paste it, because then on second screen, which is this artboard screen, it's also called red box. So it knows red box on page 1 relates to red box related on page 2. If I would delete this and draw a new one, it would call rectangle number 9, and it wouldn't know that these two that you want to do something. So just purely this kind of keep that in mind, that what I explained about, let's say, object styles in InDesign, in a program like XD, every item you make is, let's say, has a unique idea, is an object style in itself somehow, because it relates to the name that the object has. And why? Because if you make these transitions or reuse or redistribute these items, the system needs to know, if you're going from a page transition from 1 to 2, that the state per object can be different. So in this case, I made 4 shapes, and if I double click, you see that they still inside the component is called rectangle 1, 2, 3, 4, but the component is called component 1, and on this it is the same component 1/2, because this is the original. You see that it has this green dot, and in my list I just drag the duplicate to this one, and it knows that they are, let's say, this is like a child parent. So the parent is green, the child always kind of is kind of following that order. To do some kind of interaction or to make a differentiation between the two, if I would just drag a new one in here, you see that this one relates to the original. And so what I did is that once I double click on my component, I go into the layers inside, and then I can alter these shapes while they are still called rectangle 1, 2, 3, 4. So one I made bigger, the other one smaller, one I rotated, and the other one rotated back and gave it soft corners. So if I would preview this, I can make a prototype, and I already did. I could make a prototype and then say that the link is connected to the entire component. But also here, if I double click, I can also say, oh, only this shape, I can drag and link it to my second screen. And the other one, I drag to another page. And also in this case, I just made the same component and I changed it again. So there's one component, it's currently on 3 pages, and all 3 pages actually have a slightly variation in their settings or in their style. So if I would test this, I can click, whoop, or go back, whoop, and this one goes to the other link. So this one goes like here, and this one goes back. ultra easy. So you just make one shape, you can then duplicate it, tweak it in whatever form you want, and XD does the rest for you. And so what I showed also this morning is that, of course, then it's also very easy to understand, let's say, if I select this first one, you need to make sure that you understand that if you would have a normal transition going from page 1 to page 2, it could have, let's say, a fade or a slide up, like going from a page transition. But what it does here is that it says auto animate. So everything that is not being changed, let's say there's nothing about the page that changed, it's only the object on the page that is changing, it will affect that animation. So this block is a type is on tab, it's going to auto animate to page second screen with this preset snap, and it takes 1 second. This transition, also the same, it goes to second screen 1, snap 1 second. But I can also say, and I did this morning just to show you, so that you understand the system behind this, is that if you would consider the transition from state 1 to state 2, and you would draw that in a matrix, you would have a square, and state 1, the beginning of your animation, is in the bottom left corner, and then it just goes into a 45-degree, goes to the top right corner. So when it plays the animation, it says go from 1 to 2 on a straight line. If I now say I'm going to ease out, so that's when I say none. None is actually nothing that it just does, is that it goes, so it goes from one to the next. If you would compare this and you would say that instead of none, I use ease out, is that think of it as a curve. So the speed would be linear all the way up to almost the end, and then it kind of draws kind of a curve so that actually the speed slows down at the end. That's the ease out. If you would go ease in, it's kind of a slower start and then goes into the continuous speed and finishes. And maybe some of you who kind of experimented more already in After Effects know this of tweaking from one keyframe to another. You can also put it graphically, and you can almost like draw it like a curve. So ease in, ease out is kind of like flat, makes a and bows back up again. If you don't have any speed in the transition, it is just straight. And if you snap, is that it kind of like an elastic jumps and wiggles a bit, snaps. So the difference, and that's why I put it on 3 seconds, and it's almost like overly explanatory to kind of see the process of what it does. If I say snap, then or if I compare that with ease in, ease out, so it starts and slows down at the end.
When we save, or when I save, they all say cloud.
Ah, yeah, 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 you can. It's Adobe's new probably policy that they really try to sell to make you push and work in the cloud. Also, of course, if you collaborate in documents, then it makes sense. But under file, you can just say save as local document. Yeah. So this was the example of ease in, ease out, and wind up is that accelerates. So that if I do it again, woof, and now in 3 seconds, it's actually way too slow for this animation. No one would kind of use 3 seconds to kind of make a transition. But just to understand the differences between, let's say, these presets that they give you, or bounce, of course, is that it kind of stutters its way through. And yeah. So for all these, actually with this couple of very simple presets, you have already a lot of tools that if you want to make small variations that you can switch between the two. So in this case, this button goes to page 3. In here, this little button goes to that one, and this one leads back to here. So in this simple case, you already see I have a kind of a loop that I can go from here to there to there. And if I would change it in any states or even completely, I can have, let's say, this thing be there and small or like overlapping. I have no clue what's going to happen. So, you see? So that's why if you're going to kind of like detail and you have little things that are kind of running around on your artboard, all these items can have their own transitions, variations, and it also remembers that if you make them already with a link and you turn them into a component, it also understands where the links are pointing at. So if I would make a new page, and in this page I'm going to say that I'm going back to my components, and I'm also using the same one in here. If I look at the prototype, you see that it already understands that in that component is a link set to these two, because they were already part of this one. Which is super convenient, because especially when you have more and more pages, if you have one thing that is already linked as, let's say, a menu item, you don't need to draw all these lines to every page again to make sure that it knows where to go. You only set it already up in the components, and then every time you use it, the links are already embedded in there. And so the same thing goes, and that was one of the questions this morning, is that, can you explain and show me again how you did this with this menu opening and hiding feature? Do you guys remember that I kind of tried to illustrate this? So in that case, I made a component. It's just a gray square, when I pull it out of my assets here, it automatically kind of makes a duplicate. If you would tweak this, there's always the option under, let's say, control click or right mouse click, that you can say, oh, reset to the main state, the original state, and then it just turns always back to how you originally conceived it. You can also say edit main components, which was now hidden here. So this is my original, and let's say I'm going to make it a bit transparent. Comme ça. And if I make a new one, yeah, it's funny. So I have this just a simple shape, and I turned it under object, made it into a component so that I can reuse it, and I named it menu. So once I have this on this page, it knows that it's connected to this page. So even if I would not see it, if I put it in here, I see that's sometimes funny, that there is a moment that you can place something on the pasteboard, and then if I select the page, it kind of disappears, even if I try to click here. Only if I click and drag from the page, it knows it can be kind of put back. So if I have this one here and I put another one on my other page, but in this case, I'm going to say it's bigger. Let's put you back here. I'll my buttons. And I'm going to make another one here. And I'm going to make you higher. Then it would also take this into account when I preview this, and I go to the other one. And goes back. So they kind of are corresponding because still it knows it's the same object. So if I put this all the way to the edge of my page like this and do the same, it will just think that it's not there and that you're actually opening a layer, but I'm just pulling it from the side. Yeah. And again, if I start like this and I would later on in this original one that has the green button, if I would already kind of like add something or change its color or whatever, then it automatically updates this throughout everywhere I use this thing. So keep that in mind. And the great thing is because you can sculpt a lot of little details. This morning I also, let's say that we have this bar here, and I just draw a 3 little lines here as a kind of a hamburger sign. Let's say, where is my review of my? So here's my original little hamburger icon, and I'm going to make this as a component. And what I did this morning, which is also kind of a repetition of last week, is I can, let's say that, do it again. I can give this a hover state. So whenever it's a component, and try to work from the original that has this green button. So I'm going to add a new hover state. And so I can toggle between the view of having, this is how you normally see it, and hover is when I go with my mouse over. So once I select that one, I can say, okay, I'm going to make it red. And then return to the normal state and preview this. So you see it turns red when I hover it. Perfect. Now if I combine that, because I combined it here, I can, let's say, go here, and I'm going to copy paste it for now in the same spot. But then I can just open up this feature here and say, oh, I'm going to drag you here. and I'm gonna drag you there. And I'm going to put you in here. So actually I'm going to kind of animate my 3 bars to go to this kind of cross arrow and back. So if I preview this, so I can go from 1, something weird, up, yeah? Yeah, you copy it and then you alter the little things that are like tweaking there. No, in this case, the hover state is actually set to the main component, the first one that you made, and it remembers that in every state. The only thing I always I find confusing is that what I didn't expect, because I dragged one corner up and then the other corner, is that in this preview, it first, you see? Yeah, so it takes the bottom line up and then turns it into a cross. So that tells me that somehow this kind of anchor points are maybe not working as well as I thought. So I can also retry. And that's also a bit of a trial and error of knowing how XD translates these options, because I can say I'm going to just drag this point here, but apparently these points are somehow connected. So one way of thinking about this is that I could select this one line, or and rotate them instead of dragging those anchor points. It's a bit scummy what I'm doing now, but I can even also say I'm going to just take the opacity out from 1. So if I, and again, even though it's a duplicate, if I preview the hover, you see, and that's probably the problem, is that if I hover this, it would still remember the original normal state of this. So you would, so you then also need to think about, and that's probably also where the glitch appears. If I would also somehow organize this better up front and turn this also in a, this is not going to be exact, so it's going to be a bit messy, but probably give me a better idea of so default state, normal state. So I'm going to try this again. And so still, if I hover, then it's red. You see the corners are a bit messy, but I forgot to copy paste it there. Okay. It's actually not so typography style, this more, but I think that this is more of an example that shows like how you can help in thinking about small interactions when it comes to kind of screen-based media. And it also, what I showed this morning is that I can also, let's say, say open or start, and so I can also, from this first thing, I can also make a component and then copy paste that here. And if I now change the content of the second one, second, third, it will not give me a slick animation between going from the content 1, content 2, content 3. It actually functions more as a transition, because the only thing what would make this happen maybe more strangely enough is that if I would, let's say, let's try out the difference. So I'm going to say start, and when I select this one first, I can also under object convert to path. So instead of that it's a text, it's, let's say, another way of in Illustrator and in InDesign say create outlines. Yeah. So now we have an outline version of start, and I can also say second and I'm gonna say third, just to give the example of what happens to the animations between the text layer and a outlines layer. But in order to check, I now really have to check in my settings, because this one is called path 1. So I can, in order to make XD think that this is the same, I have to now manually override the naming, because here this will be called path 2, path 3. So it doesn't know it's one thing. So if I go and call this text button, copy. And on this page, I'm also going to say that this is also text button. And this one is also text button. So somehow it now got fooled to think that actually this is the same thing. Whether this is a text component, outline, and let's just see what happens. So if I go now to the second page, you see that the top one actually kind of makes a fade transition between 1 and 2, whereas the other one tries to recalculate all the vector points going from one shape to the other. Yeah. So in this case, if you want to kind of tween between different states and you want to use text, it's harder to kind of make it look like really funky shit. But if it's, let's say, for the purpose of having an icon or something, you could, of course, also say, well, as long as the paths are the same, I can also say start, start, start. But in this case, I'm going to just double click in there to just say, I think that, I'm not sure if XD is such a nice program. It doesn't really, in Illustrator, you have a nice feature that if you are in an outline path, you can use Option to select all the points, but yeah, it doesn't. So always nice, select and then be careful and then deselect these. So I'm gonna just wow. Isn't this impressive if you see me doing this? So good, in design terms. No, it's not even Comic Sans. I would even, this is one of the few things that I would need to really look what it is. Forgot actually. Let's see. It is the hobo, of course. So, so you can still kind of treat it really as shapes, and then it kind of is more fluid that you can go from hop. If that's something you would find very interesting. Yeah. So basically, that was one of the things that I kind of like pointed out, that you sometimes, if you want to be more crafted and be specific about like making these tiny transitions or animations, that you really check and watch the naming of the layers of the objects that you are using, or else you will just kind of start to mess things up. Then another thing that that I will show again is this combination for different page templates that there were some questions about. But are there any other things that kind of came up now, or? And again, I think that the only success to somehow to kind of adapt something new is to, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this, but try and iterate, just draft and experiment and make something fun. Or in the case that you have to make a portfolio site, try to use it as a tool for this. Try to make an idea of like, how would I do this? One of the main principles is that the complexity of designing a website even goes beyond, let's say, the complexity of working with type in a book, is that you have to design something and you have no clue what there's going to be in it. Because every time a user in the back can just make a new page and add content. So when you think about, let's say, your rules that will apply to make your page look great, it means that you need to also keep in mind, like, how does that page or the content and the information look when there is, let's say, a title that is 1 word long. Let's say the title is shit. It's 4 letters. But all your drafts had this beautiful intellectual title with 6 words, and they had beginning capitals that looked beautiful, and it filled up the whole top of your page. It had a beautiful image. And then there's a new page, it's called shit, and it has a stock image of a pile of shit. How does that work in your template? So you need to keep in mind that if you're designing a page, how does that page look when it has a very long title with 1 author and an intro and a text and some images? And how does the page look when it has a short title, 4 authors, hardly any images, and a very short text? Does then the page completely kind of like falls apart because your layout wasn't really expecting on having these strange varieties of amounts of content or different types of content? So you have to keep this in mind. And in some cases, depending on the budget, you could also say, I'm going to make a template for short articles and I'm gonna make one for long articles, because I could also say, oh, then the title becomes bigger, or the image gets way more presence on the layout. So you can also play with that, because some editors, they, if I would say, yeah, but hey, they say, yeah, this looks horrible. I say, yeah, well, I didn't know that you're going to do this. Who's to blame? No one. That's the problem. And what I also explained is that making websites for people, besides that you're now in the position that you might not have that much experience yourself, you're in the likely situation that you will be working with people that also have no clue, which is you're double fucked, because 1/3 of the time will go into that you have to explain how you make a website, because they have no clue what to do for you in order for you to do your work well. And so what I also showed this morning is that, for instance, as a showcase, or like a test case, I showed this the website of Metropolis M that I redesigned, I think 2 years ago. So think of this as a structure where you have thousands of articles, and all these articles, they have a title, they have an author, they have text, images, quotes, captions. Then there's articles related to it. And all this data is just a combination of cells. You can compare it almost like a Google spreadsheet. So one cell says, oh, this is the title, this is it, this is that. So sometimes I actually literally do this by showing, where are you? Making a Google Sheet, which in this first row that I need for this communication, also importing and stuff, but actually that in the columns I specify, so what kind of content would you need on every page? And then I also say, try to think about the most complicated project you can imagine being in your archive. Try to find it. That has like the longest text. It has a lot of authors. It has links. It has images, like the most complete. And then try to find one that is like stripped, that is like empty, is like almost like a non-article, like title, author, we did this, basically. So that you have a kind of a gradient, like a spectrum of the most complicated, the easiest one. And how does my design need to kind of accommodate both states, just like a hover. And for most of them, it's actually quite complicated to think of this upfront. They can think of, when you're making a book, they will type the text and then collect a folder with images and then send it to you with a Word file and say, this is the text. In the best case situation, they actually thought of naming the images, not something like MVD 9H3 something blah, 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 .jpg, but that it maybe even has the name of the caption of the image, and preferably that in the Word file it says insert figure 1, that I know, oh, you mean that the image corresponds to this part of the text. But even that is quite hard for clients to understand, that it takes me a day to read and then think, oh, you meant that the image belongs here. I'm not the writer, so I wouldn't know. But in the case of a website, which is not like one Word file that is just the content, it becomes completely abstract to them. So I say, try to think of all the text fields that you might need on the backside of your website. And it's the same for you guys. If you think of your portfolio or anything that you want to make, you can of course think of the design at large, but what would be the most complicated project for you to kind of showcase on your portfolio? If it's just one simple publication with 3 images and a caption that says this is a booklet, oh, it's fine. But if it was kind of like an installation which included a beamer, a video, a booklet, and something else, then you already get, oh, how do I organize this in a portfolio page? So you already have a more complicated project to kind of start to make a grid or a total design, and then think of the one that is actually just a simple one image explanation of a simple project, yeah? So I kind of like build this up so I can make like tabs in the bottom where I say what are the, let's say, the menu buttons, and then under the menu buttons this to say, okay, what kind of entry fields do I need? And then that would, in this case, this was for Guangzhou, but that's also in the case here at Metro Plus M, is that the article that's called Jezelf buiten de taal plaatsen is just an entry in the database with that title by Thijs Witty. And it has a lead, like you can have, let's say, the intro, but you can also say, I want to have a separate text field. And the text that I place in that text field will only show here in this bottom section as an excerpt, little kind of section to say something about the article. You can also say, give me the first 4 lines of the article and show it there. But you can also say, well, some editors want to make a small summary that is not the first line. So you can also really make that more precise. But that entry and the data is the same data that makes the article, but also that makes this view. So here in the top, we have a carousel. So these are different articles that are kind of like looping in the top. And the editors can just with a 1 button switch say, oh, this is urgent. This article needs to be on the home page. And then when you click, it's on the home page. When I toggle it off, it's out of this section. And the code decides, oh, it's going to look like this. Take this image with the title, with the author, with the lead, and construct this version of the article as a summary there. The same thing for this. It's the same data, the same aspect. Take the image, take the typology, whether it's feature, review, add a date, add the title, add the author, and then summarize them. So this is one template. So in the case of thinking about your website, thinking about your portfolio or whatever, usually you actually don't make all your project pages. You just make one example for, if I'm going to organize all my projects as an overview, that's an indexing template. So I'm going to summarize and make an index of all the projects. I'm going to make a template for the most complicated project as an article. And then the homepage is actually a collection of these. It's kind of a mashup, thinking of, so in this case, we have a carousel. Next to it is an advertising. Then there's a string of advertisements, small textual features that are, let's say, the least important on this page. And then there's this indexing design. And then it also, in the code says, after 8 indexing, make a break. Give me the reviews. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 reviews. It's the same thing, other format, or most read, also format. Continue. Then there's slideshows or videos. The same thing. It's the same as the top. It's a different view of highlighting specific parts of the site. And you guys, you know all of this mainly, right? Because these are the platforms and these are, let's say, websites. You use websites daily. So you kind of understand a little bit of the principle and the structures. But maybe it's not always clear that what is kind of how things are designed, that the same data can appear in different parts of the website over and over again, but might look completely different. And so after these 2 breaks, then oh, let's put a promotion in there. There's a promotion, and then it continues. Whether on on another page, or once I tap and go to the article, it's the same image, the same data, the same title, but then organized differently so that the structure is more on the reading. But for this front side, it also takes the same image, takes the same title, takes Mary Wang, and maybe takes a part of this lead, or maybe something else. And automatically, because in the system, Mary Wang is added as an author, once you publish that, it's not that they wrote Mary Wang in the bottom. No, the system just knows at every article, include at the end the author and the description of the author. So that's really kind of like, these pages are built up out of all kinds of snippets out of the database that appear to us as one page. So you have to kind of decide and really kind of design and think about, oh yeah, this data turns into this view. So here also, if it's related or most read, then the same can be a small little bar. Okay? Yeah, let's have a short break. So to briefly just kind of pick up where I left off, one thing that so if you're thinking about the organization, is that and I think that it's a bit of a freestyling for me today, what I'm doing, but basically it is very much about typography, but it's actually more about communication, hierarchy, and organization of type than specifically saying more things about, let's say, the aesthetic values or principles of typography. So in this case also, thinking of a site like that, it boils down to, let's say, making 4 pages. A home page, an index page, an article page, maybe a search results page. Could be that if you search for something, what does it give back? Is that in the same order as a normal, like your indexing page or structure, or is that a separate view? Or are there very different types of, and basically I usually try to keep most of the sites, if I design them, down to around 5 pages. So in this case also, like if you look at the website for Witte de Wit in Rotterdam, and this one is already, I think, 5 years old, something like this. There's a homepage, some changing elements here. Then in the program, there's, let's say, a indexing page, or it's a bit of an indexing page. So it has, let's say, a intro plus a set of input items that bring you to different exhibitions. So under program, and then there's a sub, which is almost the same, but then a second. So it's actually a variation on the main program with the bigger type, one type of size of boxes. Then one down, it's like a smaller introduction with what is currently on view. Then there are events. So it's similar page, but there's like little differences about, oh, this is soon on view. It has a little different icon. Education has also different little items of, let's say, the iconography within that. But in basically, you see the sense that I also bring a structure here that either you say, oh, this one is 2 big columns wide. There is or it can be 3 shorter ones. So there you can play with also the hierarchy and the organization of different ways of making, let's say, a more complicated, a very difficult or nested, layered program, having slight variations on a template, but basically the structure behind the building blocks are in general the same. Then you get to a shop. The shop is a completely different thing, actually. The shop is just mainly kind of a whole website in a website because it has so many exceptions. So you already have, let's say, an introduction, but then there's this entire bookshop in there. And then you have the archive, and I like to show this one because it's actually one of the most thorough ones that I ever worked on. Is that here it's the same principle, so it's in 3 columns, like smaller chunks, and then it organizes, in this case, everything. So everything means that it organizes the whole database and its archive just chronologically. The newest things first, all the way at the end, there's, let's say, the oldest stuff. But then you have filter options that you can organize this per year, or you can organize it through a director, or so here, this all the way boils back to 1990. So there's already quite a lot of articles that you can search into. Network. Then there's an about page, visit, and support. And here, a quick jump to the shop again. Like on one part, it's, let's say, the program, and you have, let's say, publication, which is more about the books, whereas shop gives you a direct access of just being able to buy books straight away. So there's more like the focus is more on having a buy online button, where the other one is more to providing insight and information about the publication. But this is also a good example where a client, in this case, let's say this institute, that you really have to kind of point them out that they, like as artists, curators are even worse, they think that everything is unique, you know, because they thought of it. It's so unique. Which means that you would need to make like exceptions for so many things in a website that just making and coding all the exceptions is so much more expensive than the entire website, which is ridiculous. So you have to, in a gentle way, say that you're ridiculous without saying that they're ridiculous. So you try to illustrate that, like, it doesn't make sense to kind of do things over and over and then here do it slightly different than there. But yeah, that can sometimes take really time to persuade them to understand this, up to the point that you say, it's going to be 5 times expensive if you want this. And they say, oh, it's not that important, usually. So I try to learn from myself to start with this concept of saying that it's very important or very expensive if I don't want to have things done. So taking this back to, let's say, practical means is that one of the questions this morning was again about, okay, so if we have a home page, we have an indexing page, we have an article page, they didn't really understand anymore, or I went maybe quite fast, how to create this indexing system of repetition on a long page. Did some of you also have this, or was that completely clear? Well, just to organize, to make a structure of, let's say, repetitive new items that are, let's say, nested in each other that make up for, let's say, these building blocks of a website that would refer to an article. But in case of a prototype, you want to have, let's say, to somehow show this, Then if they change something, that you don't need to adjust 10 blocks, or if you have more pages, that you have like 60 of these modules that you need to manually change, which in the past for this Wit to the Wit website, I did. All in InDesign. Every block was just done by hand. So yeah, you can already maybe understand how time consuming this may be. And so what I did here, I'm just gonna do this one more time just to annoy you on a Wednesday afternoon. It brings me to the same aspect of showing, let's say, on a website here that has this structure of, let's say, an indexing where I show, let's say, multiple blocks that have variations that link to other parts, is that one of the aspects that I think that are important, and when it comes to typography and the organization of information, is looking at hierarchy. So I think that it's always very interesting and important that, although I'm not, let's say, the type designer that will give you rules of this is how it should be, there's a way that I would like to train you guys and learn you how to look. So if you look at a book, how do you determine whether the kind of organizational structure of that book actually makes sense, or that it's maybe good, or that you just also notice that it's bad? So I like to kind of think of this as, if you are a movie director, you decide the scenes, so you also decide together with the cinematographer or the cameraman, okay, so what am I framing? So what is the viewer seeing? What is important in this scene? And so what, if I show this, what is not important in this scene? Because if I show everything in the scene will not make sense. And it's the same if you look at a poster or at a layout of a book or in chapters or in a lot of different things, or even on a stamp. What I always remembered from one of my teachers, Hartmut Kowalke, who was a big designer in the 80s, and he was in his 60s when I went to St. Joost. He was a really nice guy, and he for years worked at Total Design with Wim Krauwel. He said, there's a couple of things about what makes a poster work. And I think that it actually works on a lot of levels. Is that if we think of a poster, first, it needs to draw my attention. If it doesn't draw my attention, it's already failed. So something that needs to be impactful, have a visual, have a kind of clarity or an iconic kind of gesture, or maybe utterly vague, that's something I think like I hold on my attention and think, what is this? And secondly, our brains are already so trained, especially you guys, also because you're studying this profession, is that everyone around us has a form of visual literacy. So we know if we see a combination yellow and red, it's either McDonald's, Shell. Someone else name something? What? Coal? Coal? Oh, gold. Ah, yeah, from Brazil. Ah, coal. But yeah, you know, if there's this thing of and that's often how you play with memes or with deconstruction of logos, even like reiterating kind of this M of the McDonald's. You know, whatever you do with that, as soon as this M looks a bit like this arch, you see McDonald's, and it's kind of imprinted in our. And with every generation, we become faster and more advanced in reading little signals. So if we look at a poster, especially when you're a designer or studying to be one, if it catches your attention, you'll probably in a split second understand whether it's for a commercial supermarket food chain, or if it is something for a museum announcement. Something probably will tell you pretty fast what it is. But then second of all, then okay, that caught my attention. Then there's, what is it? So hopefully you will be able to read what it is. But I'm biking, so this is all kind of going in like less than a second. So I'm watching. And then on the third layer, I might need to stop because I want to see where is it. Or maybe I saw on the logo that already in that other split second, I saw that it's at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, or Coda in Apeldoorn, or Kade in Amersfoort, or Boijmans van Beuningen in Rotterdam. And then I want to know, when is it? And for us, then maybe if we really like it, we get off our bikes and look and then see who made it. But we have to really stop. But this process goes pretty quickly. So if everything would be in the same hierarchy, we wouldn't see anything because everything competes with this first attention. So you need to kind of like have a visual or an image or a typographic gesture or anything that just triggers that it stands out in, let's say, the city. Then I need to understand what it is, and then where it is, and who sponsors it, and et cetera, et cetera. As long as all these things try to compete with each other, you will take away from that very first momentum of catching attention and interest and what it is. And sometimes I really have to battle with clients over this, that they say, yeah, but the date is also very important. Oh, but the sponsors are also very important. So you actually then just scale everything up, put it on top, and you say, you mean this? No, of course not. But that's what you're saying. Everything is important, but then it becomes noise. But the same is on a book or on this little part of a website. So if I scan this index, the first thing that if I'm directing your view is that I want you to see kind of this part of an image and this title. Then what it is, it's an exhibition. And then on the third level, it's September 20 until 21st of February. Oh, and it's now on view. Okay, yeah. So even in this minimal little square, I try to bring in a form of hierarchy. If I make one thing big, I have to make sure that I make something else really small. And you can really play with that. The dynamics in type, that if you have a nice page layout, if you would make a big header and a big body text and a big footnote and a big page number, it sounds ridiculous when I say this, it doesn't make any sense. So if I want to kind of guide you through the pages of a book, or through a website, or through a stamp, or through a poster, I always need to keep in mind within that spectrum, how am I going to kind of like direct your view to what is first important to see on that specific page. And that's why you come in and you have like this title or this introduction, which means that for the institution, it's very clear, who has a very reflective and theoretical approach within the arts, that they want to have a big text as an introduction. If this would be Boijmans van Beuningen, they would have a big image with Kabouter Buttplug on that page. They are more visual. They want you to kind of see art. And no, this institute is more introvert, more theory-based. So that's why they find it more interesting to put, let's say, an intro or more kind of dedicated critical reflection on actual to put that on the forefront of that page. Yeah. So you need to, that if they say A, it means B. So you need to also point this out, like how can you try to make a typographic language that suits or tries to speak the tone of voice of this institution, in this case, if it's an institution, or show, or a website for an artist. So in this case also, if I this is a website for Hans van Houweling, who's a Dutch sculptor and research artist. You see here, it becomes more apparent that it's also an index, and the index is actually instantly a type of portfolio because it already gives a more visual overview of all the projects that he works on. And then inside of the page, let me actually hide this. Annoying. Yeah. So there's these images in the top, and text, and then there's sources. So he has, let's say, alternative material. So, but here also you see that it has a clear start, the name, title, and then the images, and then the text. So in this case also, this is one template. The home page is one template, where this has this kind of like news sticker box that you can open and close and look at other old news stuff. And in this case, the menu is one part of it. And then there's, let's say, projects that we already were. And in this case, this is also an index page, but a text-based index page. Also here is exactly the same data that it pulls out of the database, but instead of showing it in a nice box with an image, it just kind of sorts it in a very kind of a contextual, just in a typographic kind of list. Yeah. So if that so the reason I point this out, that if I start to think about an indexing or to structure this, it's the same way as I opened up to the topic about showing you this spreadsheet, is that I kind of already know, okay, so what kind of elements do I need if I have something bigger and I need something smaller, then how do I kind of deal with that? So in this case, I can say that if it's a portfolio, I could say that there's a topic that's called video works. Wow, cool. So what else? I have something that I need to have the title of the video work. Then perhaps also in this case, I don't know, yeah, maybe it needs, let's say, the year. It was made in 2019. What else? It was it a collaboration? Is that interesting? No. What else? Maybe it has a caption. Maybe it has a small description. I talk a lot to myself as well. So, and it helps me to sometimes think about, because if I need to play toddler school to my clients to explain how to make a website, I might as well take them along by the hand, and also then I also point out, yeah, maybe you need categories. What do you mean categories? Well, Well, you have, let's say, paintings and installations, and you have video works. Maybe you should have a category that says paintings and video works and installations. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. And then we have to put them somewhere. So it could be one is video works, title of the video work, it's the year, image will have a caption, description of the work and the project. Comme ça. And of course, we're gonna add a image. See if we have something funky here. It's always scary, to show your downloads folder in a big screen on class. You never know what's gonna pop up here. Let's see. Ah, yeah, what's this? It's not a video work, it's a book. But fuck it. So I start to kind of like play around with these potential things that I might need. So we have a category. Maybe there are some tags that would enable me to filter later on. So I could say screen-based RGB. So to organize this, then of course that's where this hierarchy comes in. You could say, well, the title of the video work is going to be important. Maybe the image is going to be important, but most of all, probably the categories and the tags might not really be important. So let's bring that back. The year and the caption is going to be also more refined. Okay, maybe I'm even going to organize it so that my year and the categories are all on one line. Caption is going to be under the image. Maybe it has a small indent that it kind of nicely aligns to video works. And then it sticks out from the description. It's also something what I often like to do and what I play around. If you organize typography, if everything is left aligned, it will look like the church leaflet of your local church, which was made by the grandmother priestess with absolutely the most horrible word perfect skills. So it's kind of like blends. So if you start to kind of not align things, it already gets often more interesting. So in this case, I can put this one and just combine this here with this. So it actually feels like it's floating, but actually it makes a tiny little grid based on this. So, or even if there would be something else here, see, then there is a system, but the system is like little different systems combined that do create some kind of organization or harmony. At least I think so. So if I would have this, let's make this like this, and there's I would like to kind of now make an index of this amazing typography exercise. So what I can do is that I select everything and again, turn this all into a compound, make a component. So we have this block. Basically, I can put this responsive resizing off. I can still even say, oh, I'm gonna just make it more like this, have a bit more space. And then I can turn this repeat grid on again and just drag 2 rows and maybe some rows down. Let's make this page a bit longer. So I have like a lot of video words here. And then as soon as this kind of component and let's say the items that I use in between, they're very rough. So I can also even take out any form of styling. Now I use this quirky typeface that is ridiculous. But sometimes I even do this with, let's say, Helvetica, without making it look like a Helvetica that Experimental Jet Set made it, but just as a kind of a default placeholder, just to show and have a conversation with my client. You mean like this? Because as soon as I make it into a design, they will say, yeah, I'm not so sure about the color. So yeah, but I'm not having a discussion with you about the color. I'm having a discussion about the content and how to organize and structure the content. So sometimes it's easier to strip and take away the aesthetics and the possibility of them judging it from an aesthetic view, but just having a discussion about how to structure the content and what should be on this page before I kind of try to make it look pretty. Yeah. And once I take this step that I have this component, repeat the component, and then if I double click, I have this component and double click, I can go into the layers that are actually made of. I can still just tweak. If I use the first one, I just have the control of tweaking the entire section in such a way that if they would say, I want to take something out, you can say, okay, then we can take it out. But then you can also instantly show them that their decision to say, oh, just take that little thing out would maybe cause you to say, that's good, but then I have to redesign everything. Because sometimes people forget that if you organize a group of contents together and they kind of like sit well in a form of harmony, if I isolate and I just take one little thing out, this whole thing just falls apart, because then it becomes like weird or disproportional on another thing. And they quite often don't see the implications of what they're asking you to do. So they also always think, you know, taking something out doesn't cost you that much time, and then I'm happy. And so, yeah, well, your decision to take one thing out will make that I'm going to charge you 1 day extra because the rest is now falling apart. Oh, why? Yeah, then I can show you. But in this case, it makes your life a lot easier because you're very flexible to really design it on one level. See, and then you have control over how that looks in an entire page. And if I would have a separate screen on that, I could even drag my preview in that second screen while I still work here, and then I see in real time all the changes that I make on the final prototype. Because if I leave this on here and I start to tweak that, you see that, so it's kind of just really, it's really live prototyping. The same as that if I would do this for a mobile phone. So also here, if I make So let's say this is my iPhone. I'm going to duplicate this. What, this new little field? Oh, here. It's called repeat grid. So now I kind of scaled it down, and then it's the same thing, but now it works, let's say, for my mobile phone preview. So I have this, let's say this would be my phone. I can even attach my USB to it and then show it on the phone directly. Try. No. So now I can, if go away. Yeah. So now I have the preview of the mobile version here on my phone, and so whatever I do, I can just kind of look at this while I'm working, or I have this other preview here on the side, and then if I want to change anything in here, I just have a kind of a live input of that. Now I kind of broke the master chain a little bit, but if I would reset that so that it kind of relinks pull it up, okay, pull it down, whoop, and it's back up. And so if I make this also longer, that also works directly, I think, on the phone, so I can make a whole string of these things. So here also now you can scroll. Info, yeah. See, so also here then it instantly kind of shows you that you can navigate even with buttons or interactions that works live on your phone. And the thing is that, of course, if you kind of prototype, then you want to have different types of content. So within that, you can just select different images and drag and drop some other stuff in there. And so automatically, I also have that in here. And that's for kind of this type of prototyping. What is the same thing that what we, of course, often say about when you're making a publication, especially in the second year, but also this year, print out what you make. Because usually you're watching at something that is, let's say, at a specific scale. So you're watching at something at, I don't know, 30% or something on your screen. And then you print it out and sometimes you think, oh, it looks actually really weird. It's actually a bit too big or too small. Or in the case of this, the good thing is also, it is the same here. Because let's say how we use the phone, if we design for the phone, you also need to kind of just use it on the phone to kind of determine if the size is right. It just works differently looking at this on a scale inside my desktop view than really scrolling it and having the distance from my eyes to the surface that I would normally have when I'm using. The same as reading a book. There's a specific distance to a book. It's the same as that there's a distance to your phone. And especially now, thank God, since a couple of years that we have retina screens that are so sharp that we can really refine and we can put all kinds of little detailed typography in there that a couple of years ago when the screens were not that high res, they would just kind of fall apart in pixels. That was, I almost find, it sounds already that I'm old if I say it like this, but there's so many things already happened in such a short time that really made that we can tweak and work with typography on such a detailed level on screens that that's really amazing. And just to have this ability of seeing it kind of move live and to really kind of design in the format that you want to work in, that's really nice about this. What else? What else? Yeah. The best thing, what I would do actually, I did it a bit fast, it's a good question actually, is that if I would go to my compounds or components, so I can just take the original back again, this first, then I'm going to just scale it to more or less what I want, and then put this repeat grid on and just whoop. Because why am I doing this? To get back at my annoying preach about style sheets and nesting and things that are related. If I would go back to this one and say, hey, this hobo is going to be something else, it's also here. And of course, the type size is now is kind of really scrambled, but I can also just tweak that in here. And then in some cases, you might need to kind of like pull it back and then pull it down again, and then it updates that view. Yeah. So then it's still nice that it's actually a variant of the original components. Whereas if I would, and you can also, prior of doing this, if I would, I think that if I would take this one out and I would make a new, take this component, I'm gonna scale it down and I'm saying ungroup component, and I would make a new component out of this, which is, let's say, the component mobile. I don't think that there is still, let's say, a reference to these two, that if I would again now change this typeface, you see that it did change it in this one because it was still connected, but it didn't in that new one because I broke, let's say, the link by first ungrouping that component and turning it into another component. So basically, either if you you probably heard that term before, but when they say mobile first, you actually kind of start with designing, let's say, from the smallest surface and then scaling it up to how it should look on an iPad and desktop. So you kind of like bring the scaling, like, and so the code actually looks at your screen. So you load a website, you make a call to the database, it looks, it says, oh, it's bigger than 750 pixels, then it's an iPad. If it's bigger than 1024 pixels, it's a desktop. Or if smaller than 750, must be mobile. If smaller than this or it's Android, I don't know how it's gonna look. But so you can really build these set of rules in the sense of how all of these things need to kind of show themselves within different formats. Yeah. That was it for today. Please try some of this stuff out. Yeah. In the end, I would really kind of encourage you to do this kind of just because I know that I've been taking a risk of not making this turn into like a real assignment that you can just wing it a bit. In the end, I just want to see how you kind of try to kind of show me that you had fun with it somehow. It doesn't matter what you make with it, as long as it kind of triggers you to try to do something that might be useful and to keep this somehow you returning back to it to try something out. Because if you just drop this for a month, you're going to be back to kind of scratch one. And I would love it that in the follow-up of the semester and then part 2 also next year or after the winter break, that somehow that you would have the tools to kind of fluidly switch between I'm making something in InDesign. Oh, now I'm switching to After Effects. Oh, I'm going to prototype this in XD. So you have kind of a lot of control over how to use type in different ways. Yeah? Okay, cool. That's it, guys. Let's say, stop share. Femke. And
yes.
Yeah. Okay, you didn't fall asleep.
No, I didn't. I follow everything. So.
I also recorded this. I will try to kind of like put it online somewhere, and then if people want to check it again. Oh my God, is it Xiao Yang? How do I pronounce? Oh yeah, you're watching again both, eh? Oh my God, it's so schizophrenic, this. Very good. Okay. If you have questions, like even if you try some stuff out, just make a little notepad, just write them down when they occur. Then you have always something to kind of like challenge me. Yeah? Okay. Thanks, guys. Are you...